Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Looks like Anthony Yarde and Uncle Frank are going to bump noses in court because Yarde has decided, claims that he is a free agent. He pulled out the purse bid on the advice of his management, and a purse bid for the Buatsi fight, that is. And as a result, he's also stated on social media that he's a free agent. Frank Warren said, "No, you're not." And Frank says, "Okay, I'll tell you what. We'll let the lawyers decide who's what." So they are, it would seem, about to, like I say, to meet in court. And of course, Warren, until maybe the last year or two, does have quite a sort of litigious reputation. Someone who will fight for what he perceives to be, contracts that have been signed, for his rights, his company's rights regarding those contracts. It remains to be seen. I mean, I'm not privy to, the minutiae of Yarde's contract. I honestly don't know. For all I know, he could be a free agent, but it does beg the question with Yarde. I don't want to take sides because, like I say, I don't know the details, but when you consider Yarde's career, I did a video of this saying how I thought Yarde's career had been so badly managed. These nothing fights sort of punctuated with these incremental leaps up, quantum leaps in in quality of opposition, namely to world level, to world title fights. Because he's had 2 world title fights and he hasn't earned either of them. The first one was against Kovalev over in Russia. He was very handsomely paid for that, by all accounts. He himself admits that. Then, of course, there was the Beterbiev fight. He gave a good account of himself in both those fights. But as I said in my previous video, if he'd been incrementally brought along, done maybe the old route that Frank Warren always advocates, which is, British, Commonwealth, European, and then on to world, then surely he'd have been better prepared, certainly for the Kovalev fight, because Kovalev was, over his best years, shall we say. Not entirely shot, but certainly struggling at the weight. In his following fight, he got knocked out by Canelo Alvarez. And he struggled badly in that fight. And Yarde almost had him out of there in that 6th round. Kovalev was in trouble, but came back. Yarde shot his bolt, was completely exhausted. In other words, completely unprepared to go the 12 rounds. He'd never been 12 rounds before. And was knocked out with a jab. And then against Beterbiev, okay, no shame in losing to Beterbiev. Gave him a good fight, but ultimately got knocked out. So, I don't know. I mean, presumably, from what I can gather, anyway, I say presumably, but from what I can gather, this is obviously about money, and Yarde's team, which basically means Tunde Ajayi, are claiming he is worth X amount, and Warren is saying that's a ridiculous amount. I can't pay that. He's not worth that much. However, if I'm wrong, let it go to purse bids. Let the Buatsi fight go to purse bids, and if I'm wrong, another promoter will step in and pay you the earth. And that seems to me to be a pretty sensible sort of retort to somebody saying, well, I'm worth 5 million quid, or whatever it is, I'm worth 5 million quid. Okay, well, I can't pay that. I don't think you're worth that. And I'm your promoter. However, let's go to purse bids, and if someone else steps in, they pay 5 million or whatever it is, fine. You get your 5 million. That seems to me to be a logical way of doing things. Now, let's not forget that in the other corner, you've got Buatsi. And Buatsi, is Yarde worth more than Buatsi? He's had 2 world title fights and he's been knocked out in both. But Buatsi himself, well, I'm not saying he's big box office, but he's spent an awful lot of time being on Sky and DAZN and having, decent level European fights. He moved from DAZN and Matchroom to Boxer and Sky. That's a video for another time. But I wouldn't say he's necessarily in terms of box office, that much below Yarde. All right, maybe you could argue 60-40 in favour of Yarde if you wanted to. But I don't understand where this idea comes from that Yarde is massive box office, because I don't think he is. I just don't think he is at all. And it does seem to me, from the outside looking in, that Queensberry did kind of look after Yarde. He didn't have a long amateur career at all. He was fast-tracked to a couple of world title fights. He hasn't been the most active of fighters. You would have hoped that he would have had more fights throughout his career. I mean, what is he, in his early 30s now? And this is another thing. He's got to get his skates on if he wants that third world title fight. There again, so is Buatsi, to be honest. Now, in favour of, now that Yarde has moved out of the picture, and it's the old see you in court from Uncle Frank, who stepped in into Yarde's place, but none other than Willie Hutchinson, who had that fantastic win over Craig Richards. And Hutchinson, of course, as we know, was part of the 5 versus 5. He got well paid in Riyadh. We assume he's got well paid because they all get well paid over there. I don't know what the figures are. But you would have thought Yarde, if he'd kind of stayed in with Warren, he could have had further opportunities. You know, Warren and Hearn and, Turki Al-Sheikh, they're all bosom buddies now. You would have think if Yarde had stayed in the Queensberry stable and made it, even if he didn't want the Buatsi fight, say, well, I'll take on someone else. I don't know who that might be. Perhaps it'll be in-house. Perhaps he could fight Willie Hutchinson. But you'd think he'd look at the current situation with Queensberry, who are now fresh off that, absolute trouncing of Matchroom over in Riyadh, and he'd say, I'm with a pretty good promotional outfit, and I've been well paid so far, and I've already got 2 world title fights, neither of which I've really earned. So you know what? Yeah, I'll stick with this lot. I'll see where it leads, especially when you're at that point of your career, when you're in your early 30s. Anyway, it hasn't worked out. Hutchinson, where is Hutchinson, like 25, something like that? He's a young man. He stepped in, and he's going to be the one fighting Buatsi. I don't imagine he'll kick up a stink about anything. This is probably his reward. He's thinking, great, I'm going to get was it an interim world title fight or something? I'm going to get an option, and then I can build on this. He's going to be brimming with confidence because he beat Craig Richards. It was a tough fight in places. He was made to work. Richards came on strong down a stretch, but it was a good win. He's going to be very confident. He's come back from a bad defeat, and Queensberry stood by him and got him the opportunity in Riyadh, just as they stood by Yarde getting knocked out by Kovalev and built him up to the Beterbiev fight. It all seems, as Warren says, I don't like necessarily siding with, because unless I know the inside information, when I don't. But it does seem that I find it difficult from the outside looking in anyway to think that Queensberry haven't done, in financial terms, a pretty decent job with Yarde. Like I say, I made that previous video. I talked a lot about how Yarde's career has really been mismanaged somewhat. But at the same time, financially, it looks like he's been looked after. And what's wrong with the Buatsi fight? I'd have thought Yarde would have been, desperate to get hold of Buatsi. If he beats him, the path is clear for a third, maybe a successful world title shot. But then the only real killers that Yarde has faced in his whole career have been 4 world titles. What's the best opponent apart from those? Well, you tell me. Probably the 2 that he had with a lad from Manchester, wasn't it? What's his name? I always want to call him Lorraine Richards, and of course that's wrong. But no, you know the guy. I mean, it's fucking old. My mind's going again. You get to this age, you forget these fucking names. It's so frustrating. But yeah, you know the guy I mean. The one who had the world title fight against Bivol last year and split a couple of victories, split a couple of fights with Yarde. That's the best fighter that Yarde has faced. apart from the world title fights. Lyndon Arthur, of course, is the fighter I'm thinking of. Yeah. Anyway, what do you think? Leave your comments below. Do you think Yarde is right to leave Warren or to get involved in a litigious situation with Warren? Or do you think Warren did a good job with Yarde? What do you think about Willy Hutchinson against Buatsi? Let me know your opinions. Comments below as always. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. And of course, hit the like button as well if you like the video, because that always helps. But I'm looking forward, as always, to reading your comments. And bye for now.